Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First, my disclosures. Number one, I don't belong to or donate money to any political party, nor do I allow any lawn signs during any political campaigns, federal, provincial, or municipal. Secondly, I was a commercial banker in the last half of the 1970s and the early 1980s as mortgage manager at BMO Maine, just across the street, except it's now the Parliamentary Precinct, I believe, the McDonald Building. I worked there for many years. And then I became a commercial credit officer, where I lent millions to home buyers to buy houses and SMEs. Thirdly, I don't consult to the housing, construction, or financial services industry at all. And number four, I've taught the strategy and policy capstone course for 35 years. As with many Canadians, I have a deep personal interest in the question of affordability, which I believe is primarily an issue of a housing affordability. I do not see affordability as an issue of marginal tax rates for the bottom quintile, who have mostly been removed from the PIT, the personal income tax, rolls by successive federal governments going back many years. And it's difficult empirically, in my opinion, to argue there's a lack of social program support for the bottom quintile in Canada, given the very sharp progressivity in our tax and redistribution system, documented repeatedly by C.D. Howe Research Institute and the Fraser Institute. In my judgment, based on my decades-long review of StatsCan income stats, the Gini coefficient of income inequality, which has flatlined for decades per the OECD, the affordability problem is not a tax issue or an income redistribution issue. The evidence suggests, again to me, that some municipal governments, not all, have created higher barriers to new housing construction, and especially new single-family home construction in the suburbs. Why this is critical is that for 2,000 years, cities in Europe, which I have visited over 100 times over 40 years teaching, and later in the U.S. and Canada, visited many of the cities, grew in concentric circles at the edges. However, in the past 20 years, a new critical vocabulary was created that pejoratively characterized the urban growth of the last 2,000 years as, quote, urban sprawl, suggesting that creating new suburban projects on the edges of cities was poor public policy. Yet throughout Canada's history, young people typically bought their first home on the very edge of the city because land values and home values were much cheaper in the burbs than in the urban core. I did it myself. I bought my very first townhouse in 1976 on the very last street of the very edge of the southern part of Ottawa. It's called Hunt Club, by the way. I couldn't afford to buy anywhere else, literally nowhere else. Forget Toronto. I couldn't afford to buy in Ottawa. I was just tapped right out. Having lived in Ottawa my life, but having visited many large American cities over the past 40 years and many mid-sized Canadian cities, and I've studied average housing prices and municipal permitting data by city, I know there are significant differences in average housing prices between cities. Restated, to be a bit provocative perhaps, I do not believe there is a national Canadian housing crisis. But there is, I assure you, a housing crisis in Canada's 10 largest cities, the GTA, Vancouver, Ottawa, etc. By contrast, when one examines Moncton or Winnipeg or Eastern Ontario, where I grew up as a boy, in Lanark County, or rural Maritimes or rural Western Canada, the data reveals prices at or often well below $500,000, in the 3s and the 4s. I can drive out right now in 20 minutes from here and I can show you houses in Kemptville for $500,000. Go down to Prescott, Ontario, and they're $250,000 to $300,000, which is 60 minutes from the national capital of this country. As lumber and building materials are national prices set in national markets, it suggests there's something else causing the differences. Indeed, the CHBA provides, the Home Builders Association, provides excellent data on average timelines for housing development by cities. What the trend data revealed, and I've studied it intensively because I'm so fascinated by this, is that the worst record for municipalities in our country for permitting delays and higher development charges are the largest cities. The Torontos, the Vancouvers, the Ottawas, and so forth. Before anyone leaps to the conclusion, well, of course, these cities are bigger and more complex, I've also examined permitting averages and housing prices in some large American cities, such as Phoenix, which is pretty comparable to Toronto, U.S. southern cities of equal size to our largest cities, and they build houses far more quickly and far less expensively. My very own sister, who's an American, just bought a house in Omaha, Nebraska, 4-bedroom. Corner lot, beautiful, nice little house, big house, 2,500 square feet, $350,000. You can't buy an outhouse in Ottawa for that. So what must be done to address the housing shortage of over 4 million homes per CMHC? I urge that the Government of Canada develop a policy of a fiscal clawback of the annual transfers to the Community Building Fund.
Mr. Lee, you have about 15 seconds left. If you
Okay,
could
I'll
wrap
just
up.
wrap
Thank
up
you.
because I'll just have my, okay. To the a clawback if cities fail to approve an agreed upon number of homes, and then we got to reform the zoning laws / development charges and try and address the deep generational discord and deep anger by our young people towards us older people. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Lee.
Thank you to all the witnesses for those opening statements. I'm going to begin, Professor Lee, and allow you to perhaps finish your thought. At the very end of your opening statement, when you ran out of time, it sounded like you were beginning to talk about that the federal government ought to claw back transfers to municipalities that fail to issue permits and approve development. Which is something we ran on that in the last election, and this was something that was quite dear to us, so I'll let you finish your thought on that.
Yeah, thank you. The reason I've come to that conclusion, and this isn't something I advocated, I just woke up one morning and said, this is a cool idea. I've been studying, because I was in mortgage lending a long, long time ago, and believe me when I said I lent millions and millions of dollars, I refinanced probably 1/3 of the glebe. Home renos, got the house and rebuilt it. And so I'm very aware of the municipal level, and this maybe I'm flattering everyone here, I don't know. I don't think the federal government's the problem. I don't think the provincial government's the problem. I didn't say that they can't change and can't do things that are better. But I think the fundamental problem in municipal housing shortages is the municipality in the largest cities. And I just urge every one of you to go read that annual report. It's produced by a consulting firm on behalf of the Canadian Home Builders Association. The numbers are subject to audit. They're using a lot of CMHC data. And the numbers just leap off the page. The average days to permit and so forth. So that to me, they're really the block. The block is the 10 large, and it's not all the cities. I'm not saying there's I think StatsCan says there's 27,000 municipalities in Canada. We're talking 10 that are the problem. They happen to be the biggest.
Okay, is the affordability crisis, the local crises of affordability that you spoke of? You said it's not national because it's not in every single community in Canada, but it is in primarily the largest cities. But we also see really in almost the entire interior of British Columbia, which would include cities outside of that. We've got Southern Ontario. Really, is it perhaps fair to say that the only places that are not affected by this housing affordability crisis are generally places that have very limited economic opportunity that people have to move from to access employment or business opportunity?
That's a very good point. I mean, you're right. I mean, the smallest towns, there's very little opportunity in Prescott. I grew up outside of Carleton Place, Beckwith Township. There's not a lot of jobs in those days there. But if you look at the map that's published by Wawa, it really is instructive. Looking at the average house prices across this country, Winnipeg, 400,000. This is 2025 data. Hamilton, Tyre, 775,000. And they have them for every city in Canada, and there is profound differences. So the differences are there, and of course, Toronto, GTA, and Vancouver are by far and away the worst.
Okay, let's talk about those two places. We had testimony on Monday that suggests that housing starts are in free fall. Yes. That there is a 90% collapse in condo pre-sales and a 70% collapse in single detached home pre-sales. So today's non-pre-sale is 2 years from now a housing start that doesn't happen. Can you? So what does this say to you about the future of the affordability crisis in these large cities?
As you know, I'm a numbers person. All I do is eat data all day long. That's all I do is I study StatsCan and CMHC data because I guess I'm old enough. That's my kick. So I study this data, believe me. And so 2 years from now, it's going to be much worse. The situation in the GTA and Vancouver and Ottawa is going to be much worse because there's a lag effect. It's a pipeline effect. So what's going into the pipeline now is far below what we need.
All right. So inaction by policymakers at all levels, including the federal government over the last 10 years, have brought us here. One last point, if we'll see how much time we've got time for, but you said that the lowest income quintile is not helped by the reduction in taxes. So we support the tax measures contained in this bill, but agree that they will not provide affordability relief for all Canadians, and that there is much more that needs to be done. So I'd like you to comment on that. For the people that need help the most, is there any help in this bill?
I don't believe so. I'll be very frank. Again, I lent money, and the price of the home, and then of course they put the test on to you whether you have a minimum equity needed, and of course you have to pass the income test and the total, pardon for the jargon, the TDSR and the GDSR, which are two income tests. And if you don't have the income, you're not going to get the mortgage. And so having a tax reduction at your marginal tax, and remember the bottom quintile, and this is again CD Howe data taken from StatsCan, which is taken from CRA data. So everybody understands where StatsCan's getting the data. They're getting it from the filings of all the employers in Canada. The bottom quintile is paying, I believe it's 5% of total taxes in the country. So that's a good thing. We're all in favor of that. But the point is they're paying very...
Get another question in, if I may.
you
And
have
I
about
want to
30
get,
seconds.
I want to get Ms. Witzman in, because we talked about how this bill will not help the people that need it the most to be able to qualify for a mortgage. I was 22 years in the mortgage business, so yes, the debt service ratios are not going to work there. So that brings us, the person cannot buy a home, they need to rent. And now we see rents are beyond the reach of also these same people in the bottom income quintile. I'll give you the last word, Ms. Witzman, on affordability for renters.
Unfortunately, Mr. Kelly, that is exactly 6 minutes.
All right.
So she'll have to answer it another time.
Thank you for the witnesses. Trying to be pretty succinct on some of my questions. As a CPA in public practice for the last 26 years, spent a lot of time with the tax system is self-reporting. And so a lot of it, the government is relying on the taxpayer to give out certain information. But sometimes the information is not always available to them. My question, just to start with, is when we look at affordability, you both spit out a lot of information and stats, but I'll start with Dr. Weitzman. Do you have the number as to how many first-time home buyers are buying a new home?
That is a really good question, and I do not have that stat on hand.
Don't have it, sorry.
Sorry. The reason I'm asking is most of us should know in here that GST does not apply to second home, a used home. It only applies to new builds. So if we only have GST applying on brand new homes for first-time home buyers, I would submit that is less than 5% of the actual buyers, if that. That might even be high. So I'm saying that looking at this as a program that is not applicable to 95% of the population is not really there. That was my, don't have the numbers there, so I guess we can't ask that. To Mrs. McKenzie, I'm wondering if your thoughts, I know you guys looked at making the non-refundable tax credit to make sure they don't lose it. Was there any discussion as to changing it to an actual deduction instead of it being, or moving it to a refundable tax credit instead on that end of it being as a reduction in income? I'm seeing that my personal thought is that probably not, for those people that are in that, are not paying that much tax anyway, so it doesn't really matter where on the tax return we're going to give it to them. But I'm just wondering if you've looked at the other options in there. That's probably where I'll have the rest of my time, and I'll succeed there.
Well, so first of all, Mrs. McKenzie was my mom, so it's Ms. In terms of folks that are benefiting from the disability tax credit, I think there is the actual taxation issue, but for us, I think it's more about this is yet another barrier. If people think that it's not actually as worthwhile as it's purported to be, even if you're not paying a lot of tax, and it turns out just by the by, the Library of Parliament in their analysis found that the most impacted are people who are earning on the.
That's great. I was just wondering if you would actually ask that question of a different different method of doing it instead. That's all.
Yeah, the questions are out there in the, in the community around, well, should it be a refundable tax credit? Should it be a deduction, as you talked about? I think right now we're living with the system that we've got, the Canada Disability
That's
Benefit
okay. If you didn't have
was
the
difficult.
the
Yeah.
actual answer on that one, that's fine.
It's chatted about.
Okay, I'll see the rest of my time to Mr. McLean.
Quickly, Mr. Lee, just you talked about urban sprawl and the burbs versus the core. Where's the more valuable land? Just quickly.
The most expensive land in any city is the downtown.
And the crisis is in the 10 largest cities in Canada.
That's right.
A crisis because of downtown zoning. Land speculation is a large part of that. Municipal fees are the other large part of that as far as the increase in land. How does land speculation, who profits in land speculation? Land speculators.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. This being the case, follow the money. Who's making money in this process other than municipalities, governments, and speculators? It's not the Canadian public that's being messed around with here. It is effectively the public that's paying money into certain people. Do you think governments understand the notion of speculators? Do you think this government understands the notion of speculators?
I
how
don't
they
think
make
any
money?
government does. I really don't.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask you is about the carbon tax, withdrawal of the carbon tax here. Withdrawal of the carbon tax in this budget is the consumer carbon tax. Does it matter if you have a consumer carbon tax or an industrial carbon tax built into the cost of everything in government?
No, because it get passed down through the value chains of all the companies in the industry, and ultimately there's only one taxpayer, and it's called the end user, which is us. We pay all taxes, including corporate income taxes, and that's been studied to death by the OECD.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean.